$400 million. Let that number sit in your chest for a second, because when it dropped in early 2022, it did not just break the internet. It broke the entire business model of rap. The biggest bag ever handed to a rapper. A LeBron-sized check written to a kid from Toronto who used to act on a teen show. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud: that money was never a gift. It was a leash. A golden, diamond-encrusted, $500 million leash. And 4 years later, the man holding the other end of it is named Lucian Grange, the most powerful executive in music, and the artist on the other end is finally, publicly, on record, trying to chew through it. So today we are doing the math nobody at Universal Music Group wants you to do. We are going to follow every single dollar of the biggest deal in hip-hop history, album by album, tour by tour, bar by bar, and answer the only question that matters: did Drake actually beat the machine, or did the machine just let him think he did? Because what is buried inside this contract, and what Drake has been screaming in his own lyrics ever since he signed it, tells a story so much crazier than the headline. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand why the most powerful man in music might be counting down the days until he can burn his own contract on camera. Alright, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to the deal itself, the details have been locked in a vault tighter than anything at Universal's headquarters in Santa Monica. But through some digging, two key details crawl out of the dark, and both of them change everything. Number 1, UMG gets a piece of everything. And I do not mean everything in the way labels usually mean everything. I mean everything created under the contract term. Streaming revenue. They eat. Touring. They eat. Merch, production deals, side ventures. Plates already served. This is the 360 model stretched to its absolute theoretical limit, a deal where the corporation has its hand in every single pocket of the artist's operation. But, and this is the part that made every executive in the industry spit out their coffee, number 2, Drake owns the master recordings of the music generated during this term. Read that again. The label gets a cut of the empire, but Drake keeps the deed to the land. He collects the lion's share of the revenue his music earns, which means this is not a traditional record deal at all. It is a glorified loan. A $400 million advance with one simple requirement buried in the fine print: make the money back. That is the whole game. That is the entire contract boiled down to street terms. Here is $400 million. Go turn it into more. And what is unclear, what nobody outside that conference room knows, is how many albums Drake has to deliver, or how long the term actually runs. But if you understand basic record label logic, the mandate is obvious: recoup. Just make our money back, Aubrey. And here is where the story stops being about paperwork and starts being about psychology, because if you actually listen to the music, and I mean really listen, something shifted in Drake the moment that ink dried. His entire relationship with money, with the industry, with the concept of being owned, mutated overnight. You can hear it. You can timestamp it. So let's do exactly that. Out of the blue, in June of 2022, just a few months after the deal was announced, Drake dropped Honestly, Nevermind. No warning. No rollout. No mercy. A full-blown dance album, the biggest artistic left turn of his entire career, landing on a Friday morning like a brick through a stained glass window. The album debuted with 204,000 first-week units, and before we go any further, let me explain how we are going to keep score in this video, because this matters. Throughout this breakdown, we are translating streaming numbers into estimated revenue, and I want to be completely transparent: the only accurate, publicly verifiable streaming data we have comes from Spotify. Every other platform keeps its numbers locked up. So using an industry estimate of roughly 100 to 167 streams for every dollar generated, Honestly, Nevermind likely produced somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million in gross streaming revenue in its opening week alone. Respectable. Solid. But that is just the opening frame. Since then, Honestly, Nevermind has stacked approximately 3.16 billion streams on Spotify. Run the same formula and you are looking at somewhere between $19 and $31 million in gross Spotify revenue to date. From one album. One weird, divisive, dance floor fever dream of an album. But the money is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what the album represents. Think about the psychology here. The second Drake secures $400 million, the very first thing he does is take the single biggest creative risk of his career. That is not a coincidence. That is a man who just bought himself freedom. Financially, he is untouchable. Creatively, the safety net is so far below him he cannot even see it anymore. So he jumps. He makes the album the purists begged him never to make, because for the first time in his life, Drake did not need the album to work. The check had already cleared. Keep that feeling in your back pocket, because it is about to curdle into something much darker. Then came the fall of 2022, and Drake stopped experimenting and started hunting. Her Loss, the collaborative album with 21 Savage, arrived in November like a drive-by. Opening week, 513 million streams. That translates to an estimated $3.1 to $5.1 million in gross streaming revenue in 7 days. Today, Her Loss sits at approximately 4.26 billion streams on Spotify, which puts its lifetime gross somewhere between $25 and $42 million. So pause and do the arithmetic with me. 2 projects, 1 calendar year, and from music alone, before we touch a single ticket stub or merch table, Drake has already crept up toward the $100 million mark in gross revenue generated under the new deal. The loan is already being paid back at a terrifying pace. But the numbers are only half the story, because Her Loss is the album where Drake finally said the quiet part into a microphone. The album opens with rich flex, and sure, the memes did what the memes did, but the real statement is sitting 2 tracks later on major distribution, where Drake opens the record by telling you his label is on his, well, let's just say his label is extremely attentive to him, for real. And then he gets specific, major distribution, labels call him Bad Bunny numbers, it's a robbery, 500 million just for Aubrey. He is telling you the terms on the record. He is confirming the heist in real time. And the title itself is The Confession. Yes, this is a Power 360 deal, but the central obligation on UMG's side of the table is distribution. The label's job is to push and promote the music. That is it. That is the service being rendered for a cut of the entire empire. It is a deal leaning so hard in Drake's favor that the 400 million almost reads like a signing bonus on a hostage negotiation. And here is the thing you have to understand, Drake had never rapped this much about his record label. Ever. A decade plus into his career, the business of rap was always background noise in his music. Now it is the lead vocalist. There is more label talk on BS, where Drake brags that he hops on a song and makes the label think they need them being the other artists on the roster, not him. Sit with how disrespectful that is for a second. Imagine you are one of Drake's collaborators and you hear that bar. Imagine being a UMG-signed artist and realizing the biggest act in the building just told the world the label needs you to justify its own existence. But like 21 Savage says on the hook, they are on that, meaning the 2 of them are with whatever smoke comes with saying it out loud. And the antagonism only escalates from there. Privileged rappers, broke boys, the whole middle stretch of that album is Drake elevating a new, openly hostile posture toward the rap industry itself. For the first time, he is acknowledging the gap. The chasm. The difference between his stature and the rest of the marketplace, a gap created by the very deal we are dissecting. Then you get to middle of the ocean, and Drake stops antagonizing and starts testifying. He addresses his financial status and his entire career arc in one breath. When he first came to America, nobody would check for him. No chance the kid would make it here, like a vasectomy. They underestimated, made a mistake about his trajectory, and now they have to pay that money direct to him. We could spend a whole video unpacking those bars, but let's at least crack the safe. First layer, Drake is saying that as a Canadian, the American market was never supposed to receive him. He was an outsider, a child actor from Toronto, and the gatekeepers laughed. Second layer, and this is the surgical strike, the line doubles as a sub aimed directly at Joe Budden and Chance the Rapper. There was a time, and the receipts still exist on podcast audio, where Joe Budden was proudly touting Chance the Rapper as the next Drake, the man who would take the baton and end the era. No chance the kid will make it here. That is Drake reaching back across years to twist a knife that Budden himself has since admitted was one of his worst takes ever. Budden has literally said on his own show that the prediction haunts him, that people quoted back to him constantly, that it was really just him saying it, nobody else, and that he did it to diss Drake and ended up hurting Chance instead. That is the level of grudge keeping we are dealing with. Drake does not forget. Drake archives. And with $400 million in the vault, Drake finally has the freedom to read the archive out loud over a beat. Because that is what Her Loss really is. Strip away the 21 Savage chemistry and the viral moments, and what you are left with is a victory lap. A $400 million coronation lap. It feels like Drake finally leaning back in his chair, looking around at everything he built, and saying two words to the entire industry. And this is a man who, one album earlier, sounded genuinely haunted. Go back to Certified Lover Boy. On Champagne Poetry, Drake said every single move is like rolling dice on a board. On the Love All hook, he said if it's going to fall, then it's going to fall on me, a long way down from the heights he's chasing. That is the sound of a man who does not feel safe. A post-pandemic Drake, staring at an uncertain world, wondering if the empire is built on sand. There is even that surreal monologue he gave about his deepest fear, where he admitted that someone asked him what his biggest fear was and his answer was that all of this is for nothing. He described going back to when he was 13 or 14, before the audition for the TV show that ultimately shaped his life, getting high with some kids out of a desire to be accepted, and wondering, years later, whether something bad happened that day. Whether he is still in some coma and this entire life, the fame, the money, the deal, is just him playing out his ideal existence in his own head. That is a real thing the biggest rapper alive said out loud. That level of existential vertigo. So to go from that headspace, from rolling dice and long falls and coma dreams, to middle of the ocean, where the gambles, the sacrifices, and the scrutiny have all paid off and the message to the industry is a blunt two-word farewell, that is not just a mood swing. That is a man whose entire psychological relationship with power was rewired by one signature on one contract. And he tells you the timeline himself. On that same record, Drake says he swears he's been pocket-checking everybody for 5 years, and then they are about to kick it into high gear. 5 years from 2022 is 2027. Hold that date. Tattoo it on your forearm. Because whether that was Drake revealing his long-term release plan or accidentally leaking the contract's term limit, 2027 is about to become the most important year in the music business, and we are coming back to it before this video ends. So Drake closes the Her Loss chapter of his life, and instead of exhaling, he immediately loads the next clip. On March 13, 2023, he announces a tour. First date, July 5, 2023. And this was not billed as a normal tour. This was billed as a celebration of the entirety of Drake's career, a victory museum on wheels, songs from the very beginning all the way to the present day. The It's All a Blur tour. And when the final curtain came down, the accountants at Universal needed a moment alone, because the tour grossed $320 million across its entire run. $320 million. From one tour. So let's update the scoreboard, because this is the moment the story goes from impressive to historic. Add the touring gross to the streaming revenue from Honestly, Nevermind and Her Loss, and on paper, before the bag gets busted down with partners, before taxes, before agents and managers and lawyers all take their seats at the table, Drake has made his label roughly $400 million under the new contract. Read that again. In a little over a year, the loan was repaid. The leash was paid off. Everything from this point forward is profit, and Drake knew it, because the very next thing he did was drop the album he had been promising the entire time. For All the Dogs arrived in October of 2023, and the opening frame was monstrous, 514 million streams in its first week, producing an estimated $3 to $5 million in gross streaming revenue right out of the gate. Today, the standard edition of For All the Dogs has accumulated approximately 4 billion streams, and using our same formula, that is anywhere between $26 and $43.5 million in Spotify revenue to date. The machine was not slowing down. The machine was accelerating. And then, in February of 2025, Drake and PartyNextDoor finally delivered their long-teased collaborative album, Some Sexy Songs for You. The project debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, moving 246,000 album-equivalent units in the United States in its opening week, and it has since officially crossed 1 million units sold. But the album was only one gear in the financial engine, because Drake and PartyNextDoor took the project on the road, and the road is where the real money lives. During the tour's initial run, the two of them generated $30 million across just 12 reported dates, instantly establishing it as one of the most commercially successful hip-hop tours ever staged in Europe. And that was only the beginning. According to officially reported box office data, the complete 34-date European run ultimately grossed $88 million. Then, because apparently one continent was not enough, Drake launched the Anita Max Win Tour in early 2025, marking his first performances in that region since 2017. Across 12 officially reported shows, the tour sold more than 200,000 tickets and grossed approximately $30 million. So here is where we stop and put the whole picture on the wall like a crime board, because the total is the story. 4 projects. 2 major touring runs. Music and music alone. From the moment the deal was signed to today, Drake has helped generate an estimated $541 to $551 million in gross revenue. Call it $550 million, round and ruthless. Now, before we get to what comes next, I have to ask the question that should be keeping Lucian Grange up at night. Do we actually think, in the 4 years since signing this deal, that Drake blew through the initial $400 million he was given? And I am not talking about taxes or overhead. Remember, Drake sees a percentage of the $550 million he has already generated for the label, on top of the advance. So the man is sitting on a mountain of cash that most artists could not spend in 3 lifetimes. And I need you to understand how insane this is in context. An artist generating more than the negotiated value of his own record deal, in only 4 years, is not supposed to happen. It is not in the models. It is not in the projections. The entire economics of the music industry are built on the assumption that the label fronts the money and owns the artist's output long enough to make the risk worthwhile. Drake looked at that assumption and broke it over his knee. That is the bargaining power he carries into every negotiation from here on out. He is not an artist asking his label for things anymore. He is a revenue event that the label cannot afford to lose. And that, right there, is where this story takes its darkest turn. Because today, we see a Drake whose relationship with money, with his label, and with the entire industry has been permanently altered, and the evidence is not hidden in contract leaks or insider reports. It is hiding in plain sight, in his own lyrics, on the very songs he is releasing right now. On one of his newer records, Drake openly mentions that he is ready to battle the label, the majors, and the radio stations. All 3. In one breath. Now rewind with me for a second, back to major distribution, and remember what we established: the label's primary contractual obligation in this deal is distribution. Pushing the product. Promoting the music. So when Drake starts talking about battling the label, he is not talking about money. The money is settled. He is talking about the one thing the label still controls, the one lever they still have, the machinery of promotion itself. And there is a central tension running through all of his recent music, a paranoia that he keeps returning to like a wound he cannot stop touching. He refers to the label as they. They have been trying to find his replacement. Repeatedly. For years. Think about what it does to a man's psychology to know that the corporation paying him $500 million is simultaneously holding auditions for his funeral. But my favorite moment, the 4 bars that this entire video could be built around, comes when Drake compresses his whole career arc, his business philosophy, and his psychological state into one verse. He says he went from mass distribution to leading his own version of the revolution, that private arbitration leads to resolution, and that he has beaten the game so many times it has gotten abusive. Let's slow down and take that apart piece by piece, because every phrase is load-bearing. From mass distribution to leading his own version of the revolution. That first movement is about independence. Mass distribution evokes the traditional music industry, the major labels, the radio pipelines, the retail machinery, the old system that turned artists into stars and stars into property. Drake is reminding you where he came from, a world built on corporate distribution, and then he is telling you he has graduated from it. But notice the precision of the language. He does not say the revolution. He says my own version. That distinction matters more than anything else he has rapped in years. He is not claiming he is going to burn the music industry to the ground for everybody. He is saying he rewrote the rules for himself. His revolution is personal, not ideological. It is a revolution of leverage. And when you look at how Drake actually operates now, the bars check out. He has increasingly become a vertically integrated business: direct deals, gambling partnerships, the Nike relationship, media ventures, OVO as a self-sustaining brand, selective releases on his own schedule, and the proven ability to move culture without asking a single gatekeeper for permission. He is not inside the system fighting it. He is adjacent to the system, renting its trucks. Then the language shifts, and this is where it gets genuinely chilling. Private arbitration leads to resolution. In 4 words, Drake drags us out of revolutionary imagery and into legal terminology, and the shift is the point. Private arbitration is the opposite of a public courtroom. Disputes settled quietly, behind closed doors, no cameras, no transcripts, no headlines. The implication is that Drake has reached an altitude where problems do not get fought out in public anymore. People do not come at him on social media and expect a response. They negotiate. The public sees the headlines, but the real battles happen in conference rooms with non-disclosure agreements stacked like coasters. And that fits the persona Drake has been constructing for years, a man who understands that real power is not loud. Real power settles things privately, and then lets the world argue about what happened. And then he closes the thought by saying he has beaten the game so many times it has gotten abusive, flipping the metaphor one more time. The industry is a video game now. Most artists spend their entire careers trying to beat it once. Drake is claiming he has beaten it on repeat, every challenge cleared, every boss defeated, until winning stopped feeling like an achievement and started feeling like a routine. Success no longer provides novelty. That is the confession buried in the flex. When you have won everything, the only opponent left worth fighting is the one holding your contract. And we know this fight is real, and we know roughly when it started, because Drake's idea of business changed drastically after 2022, and then it got napalmed during the rap civil war of 2024. On his newer material, Drake starts making predictions, and the predictions are pointed. He says they will act like they are signing a deal when they pay him for wasting his time. Decode that. Drake is in the middle of arbitration, and he believes his label deliberately went out of its way to devalue him while he was in the middle of contract renegotiations. And the speculation floating around the industry, the number that keeps surfacing in every whisper network, is that Drake was asking for $750 million. $750. Nearly double the deal that already broke the record books. So when he raps about having 400 racks on their heads and asks how he is spending so frivolously, when he says he acts like the money is unlimited, you have to understand what a strange and revealing moment that is. I have heard Drake rap about wealth my whole life. I have heard rappers flex about spending and opulence my whole life. But I have never, not once, heard a rapper at this stage of his career openly admit that he is spending his money carelessly. That is not a flex. That is a confession. Drake is reflecting on the $400 million deal and simultaneously wondering if he should have been more responsible with it. And I cannot help but feel that those thoughts only arrive at a very specific moment in a man's life, the moment he looks around at his friends, his family, his entire ecosystem, and wonders whether he can dig himself out of the hole that the battle of 2024 left behind. That is the weight of being the guy. The money is not just money anymore. It is responsibility. It is payroll. It is an entire economy of people whose lives run through your decisions, and suddenly the spending does not feel like freedom. It feels like a liability with a heartbeat. Now, I know what some of you are already typing, so let me address it head on, because this is where the debate gets spicy. Some people hear $550 million in gross revenue and immediately say, well, that is the label's money, not Drake's money, so what is he even complaining about? And to those people I say, you are missing the entire point of the heist. Gross revenue is the scoreboard that matters in a negotiation, because it is the number that proves the machine works. When Drake sits across from Lucian Grange, he is not arguing about his personal bank account. He is pointing at a mountain of verified, box office reported, Spotify confirmed money and saying, I did that. Me. In 4 years. During the worst public relations crisis of my career, with the entire industry allegedly conspiring to crown my replacement, I still out-earned the deal you wrote to contain me. That is not a complaint. That is a threat. And every lawyer in that arbitration room knows it. Because you have to remember the context of when this renegotiation was happening. This was not Drake negotiating from the mountaintop in 2022, fresh off the announcement, untouchable and celebrated. This was Drake negotiating in the shadow of 2024, after the most devastating public battle any superstar rapper has ever taken, after the Super Bowl, after the Grammys, after an entire year where the culture seemed to collectively decide it was open season on him. Any other artists value craters in that scenario. Any other artist walks into that room hat in hand, grateful for whatever the label offers. And instead, the whispers say Drake asked for $750 million. Do you understand the audacity of that number? That is a man looking at the worst year of his public life and concluding that his floor is still higher than everybody else's ceiling. Whether you love him or cannot stand him, you have to respect the sheer nerve of the ask, because it tells you exactly how Drake reads his own scoreboard. The battle did not devalue him. In his mind, it baptized him. And honestly, the touring data backs the delusion. Look at the Anita Max win run again, because this detail slides under the radar. Those were his first shows in that region since 2017. 8 years away. An 8-year absence is supposed to kill a touring market. Promoters have entire actuarial tables built around the decay of demand when an artist disappears. Drake came back after 8 years, in the immediate aftermath of the battle, and sold over 200,000 tickets across 12 shows. The demand did not decay. It compounded. That is the number the label cannot spin, cannot suppress, and cannot replicate with any of the replacements they have allegedly been grooming. You can manufacture a streaming moment. You cannot manufacture 200,000 people buying tickets to see a man the internet spent a year declaring finished. Which brings us to the part of this story that genuinely does not have a precedent, and I have looked. There is no template for what Drake is attempting, because every artist who reached this altitude before him played the endgame differently. Some signed away their masters for the upfront bag and spent decades trying to buy them back. Some went independent before they had the leverage and watched the machine bury them. Some took the residency money and faded into legacy act comfortable. Drake is attempting something none of them pulled off: ride the biggest advance in the history of the genre, recoup it at record speed, keep the masters the whole time, use the label's own distribution muscle to build the revenue case against the label, and then walk out the front door owning everything, at the exact moment his market value has never been more proven. If he pulls it off, every contract negotiation in music for the next 20 years gets conducted in his shadow. If he fails, he becomes the cautionary tale executives tell young artists forever: this is what happens when the goose decides it owns the golden eggs. Either way, the ending of this story rewires the business. The only thing left to decide is which version of history we are watching. And one more layer before we close the books on the money, because the master ownership clause deserves its own spotlight. In a standard deal, the label owns the masters forever, and the artist spends the rest of their career as a tenant in a house they built. Drake flipped that. Every stream of every song recorded under this term feeds a catalog that he owns, which means the $400 million was not the label buying his music. It was the label renting a window of his output while he kept the building. 20 years from now, when honestly, Nevermind and Her Loss and For All the Dogs are still printing catalog revenue, that money flows to Drake's side of the ledger. The label got its cut of the gold rush. Drake kept the mine. That is the clause historians will circle when they write about this deal, and it is the clause that makes every future negotiation a formality, because you cannot threaten a man with a vault when he already owns the vault. And the paper trail of this unraveling is written directly into his song titles, which might be the most audacious part of this entire saga. Look at the pattern, because Drake is communicating in plain sight. There is a record where he calls himself Lucian's golden goose, literally name-checking the chairman of Universal Music Group and framing himself as the prize animal in Lucian's house, shaking things up from the inside. There is a record where he demands his freedom outright. There is a record where he croons, almost mournfully, that his label has to free him. The titles themselves read like a ransom note written in reverse: make them cry, make them know, make them remember, make them pay. That is not an album track list. That is an escalation ladder. That is a man narrating his own hostage situation in real time and daring the label to do something about it, because what are they going to do, drop the golden goose? The hook across this entire stretch of music emphasizes one ultimate desire: freedom. Freedom from 3 possible futures, and only 3. Option 1, Drake is satisfied once he fulfills the contract, and the speculation points to a final release obligation landing around May of 2026, after which he simply walks away from the table with his masters, his money, and his leverage intact. Option 2, he satisfies the deal and then refuses to extend the partnership with UMG, taking his catalog-generating machine to a new partner in the open market. Imagine the bidding war. Imagine Epic Records or Sony getting the call. Every chairman in the industry would empty the vault before the phone hit the cradle. Or option 3, the nuclear option, the one that should terrify every executive in Santa Monica, Drake goes fully independent. Now let's actually sit with that for a moment, because I do not think people have properly gamed out what an independent Drake looks like. Remember the gross amounts we just laid out. Nearly $600 million generated from music alone in 4 years, and that is before you count the ventures outside music entirely. Now imagine that revenue never gets split. Imagine every streaming dollar flowing directly into Drake's operation with no label skimming its percentage off the top. Yes, Drake is a business, and businesses have costs. He would pay his staff, his collaborators, his family, his friends, the entire OVO infrastructure. But imagine him owning the entire operation from top to bottom, masters, distribution decisions, release schedules, marketing, everything. That is not an artist anymore. That is a label. That is a competitor. That is a reality no major label on earth wants to face in the open market, because an independent Drake does not just take his own revenue off the table. He becomes the proof of concept that the entire system is optional. Every superstar watching from the sidelines would start doing the same math we are doing right now. That is the real threat. Not losing Drake. Losing the argument. And the ultimate evolution of this financial chess match, the checkmate position Drake has been building toward, arrives in a record where the opening refrain tells you the contract talk is frying his brain, that the numbers they are discussing are actually insane. He is communicating on 2 levels at once, through the title and through the hook, confirming everything we have laid out in this video. His value has outgrown the frame the industry built for it. And this is where the whole story snaps into focus, because there is an old clip of Drake talking about the nature of this business that plays like prophecy now. He said they will tell you that you are the man one day, and the next day it is $1 billion and opinions change. He said you just have to keep working, that you cannot acknowledge how well it is going, that you have to get better, because that is just how it works. And then he said the part that explains everything: as far as legacy goes, forget hip-hop, let's talk about music, because that is how he wants to be remembered. Hip-hop and rap are great, but it is just a genre, and plenty of artists in other genres have done the exact same things, if not more. If you are really about it, he said, you want to be remembered in the legacy of music itself. That is the endgame. That is what the 400 million was always purchasing. Not albums. Not streams. Immortality. A permanent seat at a table that has no genre, no era, and no expiration date. So here is where we land. A kid from Toronto who the American market would not check for signed the biggest deal in rap history, paid it back in a little over a year, generated over $500 million in gross revenue, watched his label allegedly shop for his replacement while cashing his checks, survived the most brutal battle hip-hop has ever seen, and emerged on the other side rapping about arbitration, golden geese, and freedom like a man marking days off a calendar. And that calendar, if his own bars are to be believed, runs out in 2027. 5 years of pocket checking, then high gear. The countdown is already running, and every song Drake releases from now until then is not just music. It is a message in a bottle, thrown over the wall of the castle he paid for but does not yet own. The only question left is whether the man who beat the game so many times it got abusive has one final boss left in him, or whether the machine that made him has one final trick it has not shown anybody. So now I need to hear from you. Do you think Drake walks away from UMG when the term is up, or does he re-sign for the $750 million? Do you believe an independent Drake would actually work, or is the label machinery the real engine behind the numbers? And be honest, did the industry create Drake, or did Drake create the industry he is now trying to escape? Let me know every single thought in the comments, because this one is going to be debated for years. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, and hype it up while you are at it, because the next chapter of this story is already being written, and when that contract finally expires, you are going to want to be here when we do the math all over again. Because if you thought 400 million rattled hip-hop, wait until you see what the number looks like when Drake is the one writing the check.